Greetings, ladies and metal-gents, and welcome to this latest edition of Tales from Outer Space, where I take stories from across the internet and read them for your entertainment. This particular story is called Little Campfires, written by RoyalHyacinthus. There's something elegant about watching a steel wrench fly, head over handle in zero-G. It shines, catching the light of stars and lumens, reflecting them in a mirror of a grand interstellar dance. Yes, such quiet dignity as it spins and glides, freed from the twin chains of gravity and duty. Much better than one is left in the air, floating and motionless. It makes a simple tool look like a grave omen. Our ancient guardian, progress, seems to hold it in vigil, a staff of office that shifts and changes and yet somehow remains oh so similar through the years. Here, it seems to stay, you dropped this. It would never be so impolite as to voice the final part of its warning, but even the unsaid can be heard if you listen carefully. Don't do it again. Despite this, I see engineers and workers abandon their charges as a matter of convenience. Perhaps they don't see progress as a modern deity like I do. Maybe it knows they will return, stalwart champions and worthy heroes, instead of itinerant supplicants like me. It might even be that these logical, practical men are less rational than they would care to admit, and simply trust an old companion to safeguard their tools. I would not know. I am a watcher, and so that is not my duty. It is mine to observe and listen, and to pick through the interplay of a universe and the beings that writhe within it. There are those who would argue that these days the universe is the one writhing. Watch us, they say. Observe as we turn potential into the kinetic, the chemical, the driving force of our dreams. Listen to the ringing of our factories, the hissing in our labs, the minds of our people as they cry out for the future. We command mighty talk, bound within the steel jaws and crow handles of a wrench, and that's when we're playing nice. I would not know. I am not an engineer, thankfully. Manipulating the rules of the universe is not my duty. I simply observe. I see the rules we use to bind these forces, the limits we place upon ourselves, the 1,001 tenets of safety. Thou shalt stay alert. Thou shalt wear thy protective gear. Yeah, and tightly. Thou shalt use the right tools for the job, unless the word chief be in front of engineer in thy title. Then thou can use whatever bloody tools thou damn well please. And finally, the rule that stands as king, thou shalt never take an unnecessary risk. And here is where I, the humble observer, must ask, what risk? If the universe is our playground, a set of mechanisms to exploit for our benefit, then surely there are none. There are no rules, because there is nothing we can do wrong. There are no precautions, because post-caution is good enough. There are no levers of the world we must lock into place, because there are never fools who leverage expedient tragedy into personal gain. The truth, as always, lies somewhere in the communion of these views. We stand on the shoulders of giants, yes, but we ascend on a staircase of bones. This I do know. I see echoes of forefathers, stretching back to the time when mighty progress was banging one rock against another to create sparks. There are throwbacks and holdouts in all niches of modern day. Some are more obvious than others, but only if you know which stones to peer under. I've watched the Lane, graceful, nocturnal gliders that they are. Their sun burns without discrimination or pity. It burns them, it burns their earth, and one day it'll burn itself into a supernova. Some things are just born angry, and worse, they teach everything they touch to be just as full of rage. Winds, taught by the solar father to hate, regularly ripped Lane ancestors from the red sky. So they adapted. They burrowed deep and waited patiently at the mouth of their tunnels for twilight. As the sun began to set and defiantly give way to cool night sky, they would emerge, a vista full of rainbow lights, and brilliant stars greeted them, and they would navigate the skies of a world determined to burn and bury them. Today, they are mostly known by their long, formless veils, Most suns would be the last thing their sensitive eyes ever saw, and so they must protect themselves from every layer of foreign ultraviolet. They achieve this with black clothing that covers them head to toe in a cloak of native night. If you were to casually watch them, you might wonder how they navigate their own ships, let alone a foreign world. If you were to carefully observe them, you might see how miraculously aware they are of everything around them, not just in front, but behind, below, above, always above. That's where their predators lived. If you were to professionally listen to them, and befriend them, and be invited to their home, they might even show you the wonders of the Borealis cloak. Borealis, of course, is a mangling of the native word. A more accurate translation would be guiding tears of those who cannot return from the heavens. But the gulf between more accurate and truly accurate is always as wide as an ocean. As it slipped over your head, you would see the stationary world as a series of static constellations. Any and all movement would be turned into a stunning array of rainbow lines, different shades indicating different speeds in an elegant continuity. You might have wept at the sheer beauty of it, and begged your new friends for one all your own. It might even now be hanging in your ship, well worn and better loved. The Lelian have a saying, dance around the moon and the sun will still be smiling. I've observed the Ursh, proud and lithe, sprinters over the endless steppe. The grasslands encompass their planet like a skin, broken only by thin pockets of marsh and sickly lines of turgid rivers. They were hunters, apex predators, but there was so very little to chase in the empty wastes that are their home. And when truly alone, even the mightiest hunter will seek companionship. The Ursh found it in bugs, more specifically colonies of lightning bugs attracted to spoor of the creatures they hunted. But that wasn't all they did. Oh no. Some bugs would fly around sources of water. Some would start making small dens a month before the grand wind arrived in its yearly journey across the world. Some would secrete a delicious, sugary substance that has since become a staple food. And of course, some bugs ate corpses. The Ursh saw these tiny, diverse communities and began asking that question so prevalent to sapient conditions. Why? Why do they live this way, and we so differently? Why do they chase water and make food and eat the dead? Why can't I understand? How do I understand? And so progress raises its standard over yet another species. The Ursh of today are masters in both nanotechnology and biology, because it is simply part of who they are. They and their lightning bugs are truly symbiotic, in ways that even a practiced observer have no hope of truly understanding. For example, a casual look will tell you that their bugs often bring them food. We all need to eat, after all, and there are worse ways to achieve that in a legion of tiny butlers. But that casual glance will not tell you is that those bugs are also probing for toxins, potential poisons, allergens, and anything that has the slightest chance of being a vegetable. More professional look, perhaps by a colleague in biology, will see these bugs are definitely derived from the native species. They would probably fail to see the tiny augments and wire-thin ligaments in each Ursh painstakingly crafts for their personal swarm. A fellow worker in nanotechnology might wonder why they went to such effort. But a lifelong listener would be able to tell them. They would say that if you looked even closer, you would see the equivalent of spot or Rex engraved on certain augments, and the way favored bugs get an extra portion of leftover scraps. But I lived with my host. I asked them for the Ursh name of their symbiote. The closest I could understand is 800 faces for each of their traditional uses. I decided to repay my host by sharing what I thought their tiny companions would call them. When I said, big friendly thing that gives me a lot of food, they smiled. They said I was almost right. The Ursh, too, have a saying. The wind carries dust, carries rain, carries dust. I have listened to the humans, the stubborn, the upright. Theirs is a world dominated by extremes, and so is forced to meet itself in the middle. There are crackling tundras and shifting deserts, dense forests and blank plateaus, and everything in between. And As is so often the case, the inhabitants mirror their world in the extremes they go to avoid its deprivations. They were neither hunter nor hunted, predator nor prey. They lived in the middle, and perhaps that is why their planet took pity on them. Perhaps that is why progress appeared before them in the form of a roaring flame. They had to carry it, oh yes, and in their own hands, no less. I could tell you how many times they stumbled in those first steps, how many ways they devised to carry fire, how many of those brought them only sorrow. In a hearth, on an arrow, as a wild, hungering beast, spreading and burning everything it touched. I could tell you about the days they thought they mastered it, in iron and coal, how it showed them who truly held the reins, and gave them gifts faster than they could find wisdom. I could tell you about bullets, mortars. I could tell you about 2 atomic bombs and how they mourned. But instead, I will tell you what I have seen. Humans, just like every other species, carry their past with them wherever they go. They carry it instead of wearing it or taming it. A fresh observer, wet behind the ears and straight from university, might assume it is their clothes. This would be a valid guess, except for the fact that it is extremely wrong. An aspect of progress will develop alongside the host species, and clothes are fairly static in the grand scheme of things. There are only so many ways to put on pants before you see ass. A more experienced observer might say it's in each other. This is also a valid guess, and has the benefit of being partially correct. They are social creatures, by any stretch of the imagination. There are too many stories about unlikely friendships and tears and desperate last stands. There are too many stories about hate and us and them. But no, I believe humans keep their past in the same place they have always kept it, their hands. The watchman once held a torch to light the darkness and protect them and theirs. An engineer once held a shovel to feed their hungry train and push the world into the future. The modern human carries a wondrous light so that they might see the world and have the world see them. The same way their ancestors once did, as they lit their faces and screamed into the world that they were here, and that they would live, and that they would make the world theirs, and that they would love and die and create and destroy and be. The humans, of course, also have a saying. Wherever you go, there you are. End of story. I would just like to thank the T5 supporters. Bushmaster 117, Casper Arnholtz, Dragzoon WRE, Elijah Silvercross, Gray, John Carrington, and Severin Cerberus. Thank you very much.